Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking to you about snake mites. Snake mites are a small ectoparasite, also known as a parasite on the outside like a flea or a tick, that can be found in reptile collections around the world. Snake mites can be a real pest when it comes to having a collection of reptiles, because a lot of the time if one of your reptiles gets them, all of them are going to have them because they spread very quickly and very easily. Snake mites are found on the surface of a snake or lizard's skin. They like to hide underneath the scales where they live, sucking up the blood of the reptile. This is obviously very annoying for the reptile because it's like an itch. It'd be like if you had little fleas or little bugs running all over you. You could feel them, you're trying to itch them, you're trying to get them off, but in the case of snakes, they don't have arms or hands to be scratching and removing them. When a snake has snake mites, they will often try and submerge themselves in a bowl of water. They do this in an attempt to relieve the irritation that the snake mites are causing. Adult snake mites can live up to about 40 days. Females lay about 20 eggs every 4 or 8 days after sucking blood. Females will lay the eggs in a very humid environment, so usually inside a moist hide or underneath a water bowl. On average, 50 hours after being laid, the eggs will hatch. Because of this rapid life cycle, infestations can get really out of hand very, very quickly. I've recently been given a hognose juvenile who I've named Truffle because he likes to dig a lot. Truffle has a case of snake mites, and because of the fact that I have lots of other reptiles, coupled with the fact that I have a bioactive environments, I've decided to try and treat him in a more naturalistic way. So there's lots of options for how you can treat snake mites, but I've chosen to use Taurus mites. Taurus mites are a predatory mite that eat snake mites. So what I did was I ordered a bottle of these Taurus mites, or predator mites, and I sprinkled all the sawdust that they came in into Truffle's tub, and I let them loose in there. These predator mites will then hunt down the snake mites that are annoying Truffle, and they will eat them. When all the snake mites are gone, the predator mites will live for a while, but eventually die off because their main food source is these snake mites. This is my preferred way to treat snake mites if they ever do crop up in any of the animals that I have, because it means I'm not putting any chemicals in there that might damage the cleanup crew and my bioactive vivs. I'm not putting medicines and pesticides and such on my reptiles. Even though some of them are completely safe, I personally just don't like to take the risk. So after I put in the snake mites with the sawdust that they came in with Truffles here, I used a spoon to just sort of mix around the dirt a bit to let the mites mingle in and find their dinner. Truffle wasn't overly happy with me, but he's also just in a bad mood because he's itchy and he's uncomfortable and he's only new with me, so he hasn't managed to settle properly and he's just not happy. An important thing to keep in mind when you're treating an animal with snake mites, or if you suspect an animal has snake mites, is to never touch your own collection after touching anything to do with the infected animal. So I have Truffle here staying in a completely separate room on a completely separate floor, and I have certain clothes I wear when I'm with him, and then I'll go take a shower before I go anywhere near my room where my animals are kept. It's just not worth it mixing around different animals that have just come in, because for all I know he could have something else wrong with him as well that I haven't realised yet because I've only had him a week or two now. This is why a quarantine period is extremely important when you get a new animal. If it's your first ever reptile, it's okay, it's fine, you can just put them wherever you want them. But if you already have a reptile and you bring a new one into the house, don't let them anywhere near each other for at least a month. So I prefer to do 2 months, because if these mites live for 40 days as adults, then any of the eggs that are already there on them 40 days after giving these predator mites, there's still going to be eggs that are hatching. So realistically, because I know he has mites, it'll probably be closer to 2.5 or 3 months before I put him anywhere near any of my other animals. I tried to get an image of, there are some mites in the bottom here that got left behind, and in some of the parts here you can see them and some of them you can't, but they were in the very bottom of the bottle, and then I shook them out a bit so they were nearer to the top. Snake mites are small, spherical, dark-bodied with very tiny legs, whereas the Taurus mites are kind of like an orangey brown colour with a little bit longer legs than the snake mites, and they're much, much faster. If you have a bioactive setup, you're far less likely to have snake mites as an issue. This is mainly due to the fact that there'll be competition in the Viv between the other cleanup crew, and that makes it a lot more difficult for the snake mites to find a safe place to lay their eggs. So if there's springtails and woodlice and they're living in the more humid areas, they're not going to allow a snake mite to walk in and lay eggs there. If you don't know what a bioactive Viv is, or if you don't know how to set one up, I'm actually going to be doing a few videos on how to set one up from scratch. I'm just in the middle of making them and I wanted to release them roughly around the same time, so they'll be up as soon as a few more supplies have arrived. The main cause of getting snake mites is actually from either bringing in animals that already have it on them or being in an area that is infected with them. So going to reptile shows, going to pet shops at reptiles, purchasing substrates and stuff that are already made up that may have been in contact with someone who is in contact with an infected reptile. So they're not actually naturally occurring in the wild that we are aware of, but they do get carried around very easily on bags of substrate and in pet shops and such that have animals, because there's no way for you to check every animal in a pet shop, so they may have them, they may not. So just make sure to change your clothes, clean your hands, sanitize things before you go anywhere near your collection if you've been anywhere else that day. So just overall and in a nutshell, snake mites are not the end of the world, but they are a pain in the ass. So try get on top of them as quickly as you can before they reproduce to the point that it's an infestation. That's it for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment them below, and thank you very much for watching.